OK, let's turn now back to Joseph Biden, one of the other many big stories that we're covering on Talk today. Speaking for the first time since quitting the US presidential race, Joe Biden says he couldn't let his personal ambition stand in the way of saving democracy. The 81-year-old praised Kamala Harris, who, after his endorsement, says she secured enough Democratic delegates to become the presidential nominee in his place. God help us. Let's listen to a bit more of what Joseph Biden said overnight.
You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation.
So there's President Joe Biden effectively saying that nothing can stand in the way of democracy, including him, which is the reason he stood down. Now, obviously, the reality is we know why he stood down. It's because he has mental health issues. He has issues with regard to his ability to function. And I say that with no criticism, but the fact that that's been kept from the American public for the last year or two or more is pretty outrageous, I think. It's pretty much, as I said earlier on, an electoral fraud, surely. Let's talk now to Erol, Morkoc, Republicans' overseas representative. I guess you would agree with me, Erol, wouldn't you, that this is a bit of an electoral fraud that's been perpetrated on the American public, not coming clean, all of those doctors, all of those senior Democrats over the last weeks and months that surely should have said way before now that Joe Biden wasn't fit to serve another term.
Well, you would think so, right? You would think there would be some, let's go with authenticity or due diligence or
honesty.
Honesty, yeah. Let's try honesty. You would think that that would have come into play by somebody. But effectively, all of his handlers and all the people around him, they realized that his only way of keeping their jobs was to keep up perpetuating this fraud. And the fraud wasn't that Joe Biden's an evil person or that he's some sort of, terrible individual. The fraud was that he's not capable of the job. And obviously he's not, because he's passing the torch, as he says, to Kamala. And in doing so, they sort of vindicated everybody who called it all out. It was very odd to see mainstream media suddenly, wow, oh, this man is struggling with his memory. Oh,
I mean,
really?
but they turned in 24 hours. They went from, like the New York Times, as was said earlier on, they went from supporting him and lambasting anybody on the right that said, we're not sure that this guy's fit for office, and, criticising those criticisms and saying, look, this is absolutely outrageous. How dare you say that there's anything wrong with Joe Biden, even though we could see with our own eyes that there were problems in terms of his cognitive ability. But yes, literally within 24 hours, they're now saying, well, yes, clearly he can't carry on. And then all of a sudden, shock horror, 24 hours later, Kamala Harris is the best thing since sliced bread politically in the United States.
Yeah, not only that, but they came out and said Kamala Harris is not the border czar, despite having pushed that for the entirety of the presidency. So the sort of Orwellian double talk and double talk behavior, it's scary. It's from a national security standpoint. It becomes very, very bizarre to think that these people have been, holding the reins of power. And now the question is really, does Joe Biden have what it takes to finish out the term? And if not, perhaps he should step down now and let Vice President Harris step up, because the country still has 6 more months of incredibly important leadership required, especially considering all the global political situations, not even counting what's happening domestically. So you have to wonder what the objective was beyond personal avarice and greed of the people around them. And honestly, I don't think that there was anything else. I think it was very, very clear cut and dry, just manipulation. And they think the American people are dumb. They think the voters are stupid, and they definitely have played to that. And they don't think it's going to hurt their chances, and their own base is basically going to solidify behind whatever happens. They don't seem to have any sort of rhyme or reason to what they're doing, and they're getting away with it. So as long as it's working, why stop?
Yeah, but Erol, I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? The kind of the U-turn. Also, of course, what the Trump camp have been saying. I mean, particularly with regard to is it $81 million of campaign funds that have been transferred from Joe Biden's campaign to Kamala Harris. I think Donald Trump and his team have had something to say about that, haven't they? From a litigious perspective, haven't they launched a legal action to try and block that happening?
They have, and I'm sure it will, not be successful, because the Democrat Party is a very, entrenched circle. But it's very questionable to think that Donald Trump is facing a procedural crime for writing a check 20 years ago, but just transferring $81 million over to the next, assumed or presumed candidate without of course, primary, which Joe Biden won. And there was another gentleman, Dean something, I forgot his name, but he got 500,000 some votes just in Pennsylvania in the primary. So the party of democracy, I'll bring up one thing. Joe Biden definitely kept speaking about the danger and the threat to democracy, basically hate speech against Republicans, implying that if they lose this election, democracy is over.
But, but based on what they've been saying about Donald Trump being the enemy of democracy and that this would be the last election ever fought in the United States if Donald Trump were to win, what do they mean by that, Erol?
Well, they're effectively calling him Adolf Hitler. They've been doing that. They've been calling him a dictator, and that's what inspired the violence that happened on, the 13th. And it's the violent rhetoric that's coming from the Biden camp. A few days after the shooting, he's out there. He's a threat to democracy. He's a threat to the Constitution. He's going to take away all of your rights. I mean, this is blatant lies, and they're doing it to drum up fear. They don't have a very strong platform, and they've gotten away with that kind of behavior.
And Erol, what is that platform? Because Kamala Harris came straight out the blocks 24 hours ago talking about abortion, which of course is a huge, huge issue, Roe Wade and so on in the United States, very polarising across the nation, but particularly when it comes to Democrats versus Republicans. Donald Trump, of course, being anti, the Democrats, of course, being, pro-choice. Do you think that will form a big, big part of the decision-making process now that Kamala Harris is potentially the nominee? Or do you think that the election will be fought, as it should be, on such things as immigration and the economy?
Well, sadly, I think that they're going to put every egg that they have into those kind of baskets, because that's the only place that they can drum up support. And just for your listeners, Donald Trump is pro-choice in the sense of each state having its own abortion policy. He's not supporting a universal ban.
But what is his view? So, OK, he's obfuscating very conveniently, actually, a bit like Lisa Nandy's done today in Britain, actually, in terms of trans women in sports. I don't want to take a position, she says, but I'll let the organisational bodies do so. By Donald Trump saying it's up to the states, that's fine, and you could argue all very democratic. But what is Donald Trump's actual personal position on abortion? He's pro-choice, is he?
He's been a registered Democrat until 2008, until he switched parties. He definitely has been a very progressive, liberal person when it comes to abortion. He believes in any case of incest or rape.
He's got to be careful, though, Erol. Sorry, he's got to be careful not to say that, because there is a significant chunk of the Republican Party, the Republican electorate, that are absolutely anti-abortion. Some of them, I think even J.D. Vance, against abortion, even in cases such as rape and incest.
Well, I think J.D. Vance's viewpoints are going to have to take a back seat, because Donald Trump has come out and pushed back, and he's pushed back against his own party. And he's even called out the far-right people, the Project 2025 thing that the Democrats have been pushing as though that's Donald Trump's platform. Donald Trump's been very clear that he's pro-choice in the sense of these horrific incidents, and he also doesn't believe that abortion up until the last week should be good. He wants something much more European or British, in the sense of a reasonable time frame, and that's what he's been very public about. He's never been anti-abortion. He was anti-Roe v. Wade, which most constitutional scholars were, because the Supreme Court isn't supposed to make laws. It was a pretty good stopgap to get us to this point, but I really do not believe, and Donald Trump has not expressed that he's an anti-abortion candidate. And I think that the people in the party who are that, let's go hardcore hardliners, they have two choices. They can get behind Donald Trump, who has a logical, common sense approach, or they can get behind Kamala Harris, who has a very radical and let's go with inhumane approach to the concept. It seems as though the baby's life has no value in the Democrat Party compared to the Republican Party, where at least we see that there's something there. So Donald Trump is going to have to put those hardliners behind him, which he's started to do. And J.D. Vance's positions aren't the positions of Donald Trump, and he's not going to be able to overshadow Donald Trump's positions on the top.
And one last question before you go, because we must go to a break. The 25th Amendment on Joe Biden now, as in him being removed as president if he's not capable of standing in the next election for another term, and it's clear that he's not capable, therefore now, should the 25th Amendment be invoked?
I think that perhaps in a simulation world where there's no repercussions, it would be the logical course of action. But in real life, it would just throw more fire on fuel on the fire. It's probably not going to happen. Whether or not it makes sense from a logical standpoint, yes, he doesn't seem able to lead. He's not able to run in the future, and therefore perhaps he should be removed.
Well, Jill and Hunter Biden have got their arms up his back, haven't they? So I mean, he's their puppet. clearly.
Yeah, well, the smartest guy he knows is Hunter Biden, so that's all you need
That's
to know.
That's a worry, isn't it? Yeah, and I have to say, because they say this about Donald Trump all the time, the convicted felon, Hunter Biden. Erol Morkoc, thank you very much indeed.